Hello, my love. If you are coming across this video, you are either interested in human design or really trying to figure out what these little fraction numbers are at the top of your body graph in human design. So in this video, I'm going to explain the human design profile numbers and what that really means. So get out your body graph to figure out what your human design profile is. It's going to be a 1-4 or a 6-2 or a 5-2 or a 3-6. Those are going to be your profile. And I'm going to get into what that really means in this video. If you are new here, my name is Riley X. I am a professional astrologer and I help my clients embody their astrology by living their human design. If you're interested in working with me, you can check me out at rxtarot.com. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you what the archetype is based off of your profile. So in this specific video, I'm going to go through all the lines 1 through 6 and explain what those numbers actually mean. The first number is going to be your conscious personality, and the second number is your unconscious self, the part of you that you're just completely unaware of. You may still live it, you may still be able to say, wow, I do really do that, but it's not something you're consciously choosing. The first line, however, is usually what you consciously choose. Does that make sense? So the best analogy I have seen with human design to really understand the 1 through 6 lines is building a house. Okay, so starting with line 1, the first line is called the Investigator. The Investigator is all about asking the right questions. And if you think about a house, you build a whole house, right? You have to start on a solid foundation. So if you have a 1 line, whether it's in the front or the back of your profile, your full profile, whether it's in the front or the back, you have a 1 line. You're somebody who's going to ask a lot of questions. You're somebody that's very curious and you really want to learn as much as you possibly can. This is also a very self-reassuring placement. Think about, again, building a foundation. You want to know if there's going to be cracks in the foundation. You want to know if there's insecurities. You want to know, what are we working with here? So if you have a 1 line, there can be a lot of insecurities. There can be an awareness of the things that you don't quite know yet. Don't get hung up on that. Remember that you're supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to really work towards understanding what you want to do with your life and where your life is really taking you. So ask the questions. Don't feel insecure about being somebody who's always asking questions. That's your human design. Okay? Go sit in your basket. Please and thank you. Good job. Look at you almost listening. Almost. She's an Aries, so very 1 line energy. It's not correlated, but 1 lines are all about the start. It's all about how can you start something? How can you be excited about something? How can you ask the right questions to really get in tune with what you want to build? Dang, where's my mic going? So if you have a conscious 1 line, which would be in the first little spot of your human design, the conscious 1 line is someone who is very aware that they love asking questions, they love knowing what's next, they don't really have any guilt or shame around asking those questions, unless you've been conditioned into that, which is a different video. But learning to really step into that power of knowing you're the one that's going to ask the questions that later on the people who are maybe going to know a little bit more may need to know. You're going to ask the important questions so the foundation is stable. Trust that. Trust that you need to know. You need to ask the questions to get there. It's also about you. This is the part that I think a lot of people don't understand about the 1 line. It is supposed to be pretty selfish. You're asking questions that will benefit other people, but you need to ask them in a way that's important to you, that makes sense to you. And when you're focused on it in that way, when you're focused on it in that sense of, I need to know this because I want to understand it, that's when you're going to get to the deeper truth of it. Don't be afraid if this is something that you feel like you're being selfish with, or you feel like the questions you're asking are really affecting you specifically, because you asking these questions are exactly what's going to help other people understand what they're missing in a different way. So don't worry about it if it seems like you're being a little bit too inward focused. That's actually a huge part of your role, is to experience life from a very individual standpoint, to understand the self on a deeper level. Now, if you have the one line in your unconscious or the second part of your profile, this is a little bit more self conscious. This is a little bit more worried that you're asking questions that aren't going to help anybody, especially if you're a 5-1. Especially if you're somebody who really wants to go out there and help other people, you may feel a little bit weird, like, hey, I'm sorry, I don't really understand this. Do your best to move through that. This could be a huge part of your conditioning. But understanding that you asking those questions, you really knowing what's going on for you, will actually benefit other people. You just have to come to that place of acceptance that you are a one line. You're meant to be living your life as an individual. You're meant to be living your life for yourself. And then you can use that towards helping others by being your most authentic self. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And especially if you have a one line, that's something that your life is going to be focused on, maybe more than is comfortable for you. You're supposed to be living an individual life. You're supposed to be focused on the things that feel good to you on the inside. And if you have that unconscious one line, you can be a little bit self conscious about how many questions you may have to ask in order to really understand yourself. And even experiencing life can make you understand yourself on a deeper level. There can almost be, I don't want to say a block on understanding yourself, but there can be a need for you to go out there and experience what other people are seeing within you before you really understand yourself. Um, Again, the one line is the beginning. The one line is the starting point. So trust that there is this brand new energy, there is this brand new feeling to a one line that you're meant to carry throughout your life. You're meant to always be learning something new about you. So moving on to the 2 line. This is a very interesting line for a few reasons. One, it's called the Hermit. It checks out. I am a 6-2, so I have this line in my human design. And the Hermit, the 2 line, really has this frustrating but beautiful energy of just naturally being good at things. You have no proof. You have no proof as to why you're good at it. You're just good at it. And it's infuriating because sometimes when people are like, oh, well, how did you get to that answer? Or if people are asking you to show your work as a 2 line, you usually can't, which can actually lead to you having imposter syndrome or this feeling of, am I really good at what I'm doing? Or am I just living a false narrative? Like, what is going on here? As a 2 line, you are a natural genius at least one thing, if not many things. Throughout my life as a 6-2, I've been good at everything I've ever tried. And honestly, it can be a little bit confusing because sometimes I want some help from other people and I just don't get it because I'm supposed to just figure it out myself. And I always do. So, if you have a 2 line, it's a beautiful catch-22, okay? And if we go back to building the house, that sort of idea, the 2 line is really the open floor plan of the first level of the home. And think about a really beautiful home where it's so cozy, it's so comfortable. You have this open window area where you get to see outside and you get to see, and the sense of having that beautiful home where you get to be your weird little hermit self doing all of the things that you want to do. And somehow there's always somebody at the window asking you, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How are you doing that? Wow, that's really cool. What's going on? And you're just like, can you go away, please? Why are you looking through my window? That's what it feels like to be a 2 line. When you're in this place of just wanting to step away, you just want to hide away from the world, but no matter how hard you try, people are always going to find you doing the thing you're good at. The reason you're good at that thing is to share it with the world. So the hardest part about being a two line is sharing what you know with the world. Because there's a few different things. How do you know what you know? You don't know. You have no idea how you know what you know. So proving what you know feels really difficult, and imposter syndrome can really come up if you have a two line. Being seen doing things, what if you do them imperfectly? What if you're seen making a mistake? What if you're seen doing something that you wouldn't actually repeat? This is the struggle with a two line, is constantly feeling like because you're good at it, you have to be perfect at it, which is just not true. So one of the big things that you really have to understand if you have a two line in your human design is you are going to be called out for what you're good at. You are going to be forced into it in some way, shape, or form. And it's your job to decide if you want to answer that call. Another thing about the two line that's very interesting is there's this borderline between shyness and boldness, because you know what you're talking about, but you have no proof, right? So you want to go out there and you want to be like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. But it can feel very diminishing. It can feel very scary to have somebody else who maybe has been doing it for 20 years. For example, me showing up and being like, hey, I know human design. If somebody's been doing this for 25 years, I'm going to be like, do I know enough to even have a conversation with this person, or am I in the wrong room? Understanding that, really riding that line of trusting you're always going to learn more. No matter how much you feel like you have to know, there's always going to be more to learn. There's always going to be more to know about anything and everything in life. So give yourself a break and let yourself show up with what you already know now, and trust that you're going to learn more along the way. The second line is actually a line of projection as well. So there could be a lot of people looking in on what you're doing and sort of being able to perceive what you're doing and make their own personal perspective and take it how they will. It just feels like people see you in a way that maybe you don't want them to. Maybe you do want to be the hermit a little bit more and sort of hide away when you're not supposed to. When I tell you, she just went I wish I had that on camera. She just came galloping in with a little sock in her mouth. Now she knocked my whole camera over. Anyway, you may not want to be seen the way that other people are perceiving you, and you can't control that. You got to let it go. You have to believe and you have to understand that people are always going to be like looking in your window of what you're doing, what you've got going on. So you might as well get out there and show it off anyway. You might as well get out there and be like, hey, this is what I do. And when you show up in that authenticity, it's going to feel so much better than trying to hide away and getting caught in your authenticity. That feels scary. That feels weird. So, as a hermit, I think one of the best things that's ever happened to us is social media. Because now we can post things and people can think whatever they want, and you just don't have to look at the comments. So, I hope that helps. Now, again, if you have the two line in your conscious self, you're somebody that would really prefer to be at home alone, but you likely are always going to be pulled back into society by your friends and by the people around you. But you do need to have time alone. You need to have that space for yourself. Having a two line in the conscious self is somebody that may just know that they're really good at things and be able to lean into that a little bit more easily than, for example, someone with a two line in the second position, like I have with my 6-2. I think two lines are incredible at pattern recognition and just being able to see things from that perspective. So if you have a two line in the unconscious, you just don't know how good you are at it. Just trust when people are telling you, hey, you're really good at this thing. Believe them. It's an unconscious knowing. It's an unconscious truth. It really is about trusting the flow of life. When you have a two line, you can't force realizations to happen. You can't force yourself to know something you don't know yet. You have to be able to trust that there is an ebb and a flow to life, and you will know what you need to know when you need to know it. So learning to trust in divine timing is a huge part of the two line as well. So continuing up the house of human design, we are on line 3, or the Martyr. This is a really interesting line for so many reasons. The third line in human design is all about trial and error. It's about experience. It's about experimentation and seeing how things go. So if you think about a martyr, they're going to put themselves on the line to test it out, see what happens. Like if I go out there and do this thing and sort of sacrifice myself to this experience, what happens? What do I learn? So when it comes to the house analogy that we've been going through, this is really like rooms, right? The rooms in your house are all very specific and they're all very separate for a reason. Three lines are meant to make and break connections. They're constantly supposed to be testing something out, seeing if that works, throwing it away if it doesn't work. So for example, you wouldn't put your bathroom in the kitchen. You wouldn't put a toilet next to your stove. Like it could be trial and error, but I mean, a lot of this is just logic. But if you're thinking about experience, you know that you would want that to be a separate experience from the kitchen. So the third line is all about creating separate experiences that really teach you how to build the whole picture. If you have a third line or a 3 line in your human design, you are meant to experiment with life. You are meant to be the great experimenter. You're supposed to be trying things on a daily basis, making and breaking these things, shifting away from the way things were, or maybe understanding that whatever you're experiencing is supposed to happen. So when you have a 3 line, one of the biggest things you need to understand is failure doesn't exist for you, only discovery. The only thing that you really need to focus on is trying something different, trying something new. If something is not working out for you, now you know it's not for you. Now you know it wasn't meant to be. You can shift into something else. You can focus on something new. That's where a 3 line really gets excited, because jumping into something new, experiencing something new is going to pull you into that energy of, how can I do this better? What can I focus on? What's not working? Throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks is such an exciting energy for a 3 line. However, depending on your conditioning, if you were raised by people who were like, hey, making mistakes makes you a failure, if you were raised by people who didn't understand you constantly wanting to try something new and pick something up and put it down, and you never seemed to stick to things, they just didn't understand. They didn't understand that your human design is supposed to be trial and error. You're meant to be going through things that are constantly shifting, are constantly growing. And I think the more you can really sit with that truth and understand, you're not supposed to be perfect. You're actually supposed to be experimenting in your life. You're supposed to be experiencing almost as much as you possibly can in this lifetime if you have a 3 line. Now, depending on the rest of your profile, this can really shift how you use that 3 line. But you're meant to be experimenting. You're meant to be trying different things. You're meant to be, typically, you're either a 3-5 or a 3-6 or something like that, where you're going to take these experiences and share them with other people. You're going to be taking these moments and things that some people may consider failures and shift into a new awareness, shift into a new understanding of how things really happen for you and how things really work for you. This is where it gets interesting, right? Because if you have a 3 line in your first position, which is your conscious self, that 3 line is really going to be a constant realization of always wanting to try something different, really not liking to stick to something for too long, getting bored easily, always wanting to do more and try something new, and go out there and experience something different. But if you have the 3 line in the unconscious self, or the second position, you can almost feel like, am I throwing myself off? Like, am I accidentally self-sabotaging myself when I'm always trying to do something new? I feel like I can't stick to anything. So being aware of where this position is, where you have that 3 line, is going to help you understand what you like to do, what you like to focus, and who you really are on a deeper level. The 3 line is a trial and error energy. And I'm going to get into the 6 line in a little bit, but the 3 line is the beginning of that 6. The 6 is total role model energy. It's somebody who really has figured out anything and everything that they need to know to share with others how to be a better human, how to live a more fulfilling life, XYZ. And the 3 line is the beginning of that phase. But that we'll talk about that in another minute. So if you have people in your life that have a 3 line, I can think of one specific person who they just can't get it together. They don't have any way, there's nothing that they're really sticking to, there's nothing that feels good to them yet. They haven't found their thing yet. So if you have a 3 line or you know somebody like that, trust that when you're in that energy of just trial and error, seeing how things work for you, you're not wrong for that. And you're likely going to be in some form of that energy for your entire life. So give yourself a break and trust that things are really actually going to happen and they're going to build in a beautiful way for you. Let yourself experience life. Let yourself show up and get excited about these new experiences, and it's going to get more exciting. And stop thinking that you're failing. When things are not working out, it's a sign to shift. Moving on to the 4 line or the Opportunist. This is one of the most interesting lines to me because every person I've ever met with a 4 line seems to just have this beautiful network of people around them. And that's their human design. So let's get into it. So the 4th line is really known as the Opportunist. And the reason is they just tend to have this beautiful network of people around them. They have these connections and they understand the importance of human connection, human connection and networking. If you have a 4 in your human design, you have no trouble making friends. It's very easy for you to connect in with new people, but you love having people that you are constantly constantly with, getting together with, and really being able to feel at home in those groups. 4 lines are all about security. They like to know what's going to happen next before they make a move. They're not like a 3 line where they're like, I'll just quit my job, see what happens. The 4 line is like, I need to know that I have another job lined up first. I need to know that what I'm working towards, what I'm doing is really going to be beneficial for me, because if I just jump into this thing without knowing if it's going to work, I'm going to look like an idiot if I threw away something that has been working, regardless of if I enjoy it or not. And I think this is kind of part of the issue with a 4 line. They can get very comfortable where they are. If they don't have anything that's really proving to them that that next thing is going to be a big deal, they kind of don't want to trust it. They don't want to go after it. They don't want to, bet on something that's not going to work out. So as a 4 line, one of your biggest struggles is learning to trust that the foundations that you do have and that the connections that you do have will bring you new opportunities. One of the biggest issues is trusting those opportunities and finding a way to feel secure in whatever is the next phase of your life. Now, depending on what other numbers you have in your profile and whatever you've got going on there, it can be a little bit different. So for example, if you have your 4 line in the conscious placement or the first placement, there's going to be a awareness of your network, an awareness of your connections, an awareness that you really do have solid friendships. But if you have the 4 line in the unconscious self, you may not realize how much support you actually have. So there can be sort of this instability or this unsure energy, especially depending on your conditioning, especially depending on your past and the things that have maybe made you think a certain way. So if we go back to the house analogy, the 4 lines are really the start of that second level where we get into more of the private space where you really only have friends and family. It's not like the kitchen downstairs or the living room or things like that. Maybe it's where you start to welcome people into more of your private space, more of that sense of safety, that sense of security. You wouldn't just invite a random stranger into the second level of your house. I don't know a single person that would do that. 4 lines are about that security, that stability, making sure that who they're bringing into their home is safe, who they're bringing into their energy, into their life, is someone that's safe, that they can trust. If you see the camera shaking, Nyx is running around with a sock again. So, so I think one of the biggest issues I see with 4 lines is wanting to check in with everyone before they make decisions. This is a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time. They're very aware that the decisions that they make could impact the people around them, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't make choices for themselves. That doesn't mean that they have to wait for the approval of everyone around them first. This is where the conditioning gets a little bit funky. Learning to trust that the people you have built and the true stability and security that you have with that network and that foundation is solid. That's one of the things a 4 line really has to learn to trust, is the network you've built, is the connections you have, and that they will actually function properly. Moving right along to the 5th line in human design, this is called the Heretic. And I feel like that's really dramatic because if you think about a heretic, sometimes they've been like burnt for their truth, right? They're like burnt at the stake for being somebody who seems to just know everything, right? Well, heretics, or line 5 in human design, is all about having deeper wisdom through the experiences that they've already lived. One of the biggest issues I see with line 5 people, regardless of where it is in your profile, conscious or unconscious, there is a desire to save people. There is this desire to jump in and be the one to put out the fires, be the one to save somebody from drowning, be the one who sees somebody needing help and you jump into it. I just recently did a session with someone who's a 3/5, and the way she really wants to save people is so beautiful, but you can see how it really kind of hurts her in a lot of ways. You can see that by neglecting yourself to help other people as a line 5, as a 5th line, you have to understand that that's not someone worth saving. This is the hardest part about having that 5th line in human design. You want to save people. You know how to save them. You have the knowledge that they need, but are they willing to listen? Are they willing to see that you really do have that genius? Or do they have their own conditioning, their own preconceived notions? Do they have their own things going on inside of them that's projecting on you, and they're not willing to listen? They're not willing to accept your help. That is one of the most devastating things about having a 5th line. You can't save everybody because you literally have the knowledge to save everybody, but they're not going to listen. Okay. Not everybody is worth saving. Not everybody is really actually meant to be in your life forever. And understanding that 5th line is understanding that you do know what needs to be said, but holding your own when you see the conditioning in others, holding your own when you see the lack of connection to somebody else. Now, however that makes you feel is one thing you're going to have to process. But accepting that truth and knowing that you are worthy of someone who's really actually listening to you is a big deal. One of the most interesting things about 5th line people is you are extremely magnetic, and people are usually going to like you when they first meet you. There's something about you that's very welcoming and inviting. There's something about you that they may even see themselves in you in some way, shape, or form. But the issue comes in when there's no boundaries. When, as a 5 line, you just show up and you're so open, and especially my generators and manifesting generators, you're just so open and welcoming, and you haven't worked on your people pleasing, and you're forgetting that you can't just literally empty your energy into other people. The line 5 can be a really challenging energy if you haven't worked through those conditionings. As a 5th line, you have to create space for yourself. You're not someone that's necessarily going to be in a hermit mode, but you do need to take time away from others. You can consider it a hermit mode if you want to, but when it comes to human design, the 5th line just really needs to clear out their energy and to take some space away from others. The reason is the 5th line is a projection line. There are things that people are expecting of you because you do know things. You do seem to get it right. You do seem to know everything. You just seem like a know-it-all. You just seem like a know-it-all. And if you're constantly in that energy of people being upset that you know everything and they're a 1/3 who doesn't know anything, you are going to trigger the hell out of them. So how do you understand that they're being triggered? you're not triggering them. You have to take some space from them. You have to create some sort of a boundary. You have to understand that you are a know-it-all. And that's not a bad thing. Don't rub it in people's faces that you have experienced things that you know the truth of now. Don't rub it in people's faces, because that's going to make it worse for you. But understanding that as a fifth line, you do have this universal truth. You do have this knowing, and you have to believe that you know it. When you believe that you know it and somebody doesn't believe it, there's nothing to prove. It's more like, okay. And they're like, no, I just don't. Okay. Because if you constantly are trying to give into that energy of like, no, let me prove, the more you push, the less it's really actually going to be received from somebody else. Having a fifth line seems to be something that a lot of famous people actually have. And the reason is they're just naturally liked, but they're also naturally projected upon. So understanding this is something that's really helpful, because if you're someone that has that 5 line and you're just living a regular life, people are going to feel like you have this it factor that's going to piss them off. So don't let that trigger you. Easier said than done, I know. But remember that if someone is pointing fingers at you, it just really means, how does it go? When you're pointing fingers, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. Just ignore them. They have a lot of conditioning to go through. Okay. Now, if you have the 5 line in the conscious position, this is something that you're really going to notice, that you can light up a room. And when you have a really positive reputation, you just have more opportunities and things really come your way in a very natural way. But if you have a bad reputation, it's very obvious that people know that infamy and they know that sort of energy. So it really depends on how you live your life, how you use this energy. You're going to be a magnet, whether you want to be or not. So learning to really live your life in a conscious way is very important for a 5 line, because whatever you put out there is what you're going to be getting back. More so for you than the rest of us, because you have this magnet, you have this energy that attracts to you regardless of your energy type. You just have this, you got this thing about you that people just can't really comprehend, but they feel it, they know it. And then if you have the 5 line in the unconscious self, this is something that is interesting, because again, that projected feeling, you may feel exposed. You may feel like people see something in you that you're like, I don't even understand why they're seeing this or where they're coming from with this. And remember, 5 lines can be the perfect partner, the perfect employee, the perfect person in whatever setting, because they just really have this deeper understanding of the truth of whatever it is you're working towards. So if you're getting projected on as that unconscious self, it can be really uncomfortable, because you cannot control how others are perceiving you. But learning that and understanding that is a huge part of your life, and learning to not operate from how people will perceive you, but instead operating from your truth and your knowing, that's going to radiate, and the right people are going to be connected with you. Last but certainly not least, we have the 6 line in human design. If you have this, regardless of your first or second placement, there is something really interesting that happens with a 6 line, and that is that you have 3 distinct phases to your life. The first phase, you live your life like a 3 line. You're throwing spaghetti at the wall, you're making mistakes, you're unsure of yourself, you don't really know what you want to do, so you just have to go out there and experience life. Make a bunch of mistakes, try a bunch of things. Now, if you were raised like me, mistakes were not okay. So having that 6 line is something that you're going to have to decondition yourself or uncondition yourself from the truth of making mistakes are bad. False. Making mistakes is how you learn. Making mistakes is how you understand who you are and learn what you want to be, who you want to be in your life. So if you have a 6 line in human design, you're going to go through that phase before your Saturn return. Age 0 to 30 is when you're experiencing, roughly 30, is when you're experiencing this shift of Who do I want to be? What's going on? Once you hit your Saturn return, there's going to be an energetic shift within you. You're going to feel like things slow down. You're going to start to really understand, okay, wait, this is the time I can mature. You're going to naturally feel it. Now, around the time of your Saturn return and right after your Saturn return is when you're going to feel the most pressure of, I'm supposed to be maturing. I should be further along than this. What am I doing? What am I doing? If you have that sixth line, understanding that that pressure is you intuitively knowing it's time for you to make a shift. It's time for you to start looking at things a little bit differently. It's time to slow down. It's time to say, okay, I don't want to work 4 jobs anymore. I want to work on something that will actually benefit me and be something that's really useful that I can help others with as well. Having a sixth line is something that really makes you feel like you need to be supporting other people. You need to be there for other people because you understand that your life is about being the role model. Your life is about being the best version of yourself that you can be. So phase 2 is getting on the roof. If you have a sixth line, regardless of if it's in your first or second position, if it's conscious or unconscious, you are going to live through that 3-line phase. Once you hit your Saturn return, you're going to shift into getting on the roof. And during this time period, you can really want to withdraw from other people. You may not be as social as you usually are, or you may just really feel that connection to wanting to be more private, wanting to not be as crazy as you used to be, not wanting to just like go out there and experiment and do all of these things that are just like nonsense. You kind of feel that sense of maturity. You feel that sense of growth within you. My husband and I are both 6'2s, and it's very interesting because we're both like, yeah, I'd really rather just stay at home and do nothing than go out, go drinking, go on a cruise. Like, there's so many things that I don't want to do. And neither does he, so it works out. But living with that sixth line in your 30 to 50 age range, this is after your Saturn return, but before your Chiron return, you're on the roof. You're in this place of seeing things from a higher perspective. You can now see the full picture and really be able to understand who you are, what you currently have in your tool belt, and what you need to work on to become the best version of yourself in your life. I think one of the coolest things about being a sixth line is you have this definitive force sort of naturally pulling you in an upward projection. And once you turn 50, you go through your Chiron return. That's when you really get to step into your role model phase, where you have learned as much as you possibly can about what you want to learn. For example, I cannot wait for my role model phase because I'm going to have so much information and so much knowledge on the spiritual realms, on being a human being and making it the most beautiful experience. So I'm really excited for my role model phase, even though I literally just got in to my on the roof phase. But one of the biggest struggles of a 6 line in human design is getting off of the roof again. You get up on the roof to get a better perspective, to gain that clarity, but you have to join society again. That's probably the most uncomfortable part because you're in this place of now finding your safety, finding your security, feeling more connected to who you are and who you want to be, and having this beautiful energy around you, only to then go into a not self world where everyone seems a little bit all over the place and things are kind of chaotic. So getting back into that world as a 6 line, especially when you're in your on the roof phase, there can be this really uncomfortable energy. So learning to do it in a way that feels good to you. Get back into society in whatever way feels good to you. For me right now, it's through social media. When I tell you I talk to my husband and I talk to my cats on a daily basis, everything else I do is digital. I am a 6'2". I am in a full hermit phase. I am on the roof. I'm just trying to understand how to not correct every person that I come across. And I don't want to sound like I know everything. I'm just so conscious and so aware of what other people need at this point that it's like overwhelming to ignore It's a little overwhelming to ignore what people are going through and be like, yeah, oh no, why does that keep happening to you? Can I see your human design chart? Just give me the astrology. Just give me the astrology. Yeah. So being a sixth line, the hardest thing that you're really going to have to do is learn to get back into society at some point in your life. I know. Terrifying. But it's a part of being human, right? Human design. We're human beings. We're not robots. So if you have the sixth line in the conscious self, you will see that you have made a lot of mistakes in your life, and you will eventually become consciously a version of yourself understanding, oh, it's time for me to shift. For example, me being a 6'2", I knew once I hit 30, something was going to shift for me. I knew I just had to make it to 30. I just had to make it to 30. And since I've made it to 30, everything has shifted for me. So learning to trust those intuitive nudges is a huge part of it. Being able to believe in yourself and understand that what you have going on inside is so much more important than what's going on outside. And then if you have a sixth line on the unconscious self, you may not be aware of how many mistakes you've made and how it doesn't really resonate with you until you hit your Saturn return, until you shift into being on the roof. And things can feel very drastically different for you, where you then say, wow, okay, wait a minute. I need a whole new focus. It's something that's going to be a lot more unconscious. You're not going to be as aware of it. You're maybe not going to notice it until a couple years into after your Saturn return, where you're going to be like, oh, things really have shifted for me. Wait a minute. My focus shifted all of a sudden. I don't really know when that happened, but it did. And I'm grateful that it did. And after the sixth line, it would start back again at the one line. This is just the little loop of human design and the energy of the human design house, for example. You would then start with a brand new house, start at the foundation, build your way back up. So within human design, understanding your profile is so important. I will be making more videos, so make sure you subscribe and like this video if you liked it, please. Thank you. I'm going to be going through each individual profile as well to really deep dive into what that means and how you can live a more fulfilling life with your human design. But if you're interested to dive in right now, you can work with me at rxtarot.com. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this information is truly helpful. And don't forget to listen to your inner knowing. Trust your gut, trust your body more than the fears of your logical mind, as well as the outer authority that's always yelling and screaming and telling you to do something. Trust your inner authority first. I love you. Have a lovely day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.